It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here.
You had a little, you choked on that here for a moment? You really are here. I can vouch for you.
I'm getting here.
You are here.
Ah, yes.
And Barnet Bain, good moment. I am.
How here are you?
I'm very, very much
You
here.
seem very here.
I'm very, very here. I'm fully in this little skin suit. And it's buzzing away. I feel very much my aliveness today.
Yeah.
And
It's exciting.
I'm very glad to be here. I'm very glad to be here. I want to share something.
Share.
Good, because our audience knows it's going to happen anyway, so it's a lot better if you submit.
Submit.
I was out to dinner last night. Sandy and I were out to dinner with a very dear friend, and we were talking about love.
Ah.
What else is there to talk about?
Yeah, that's true.
We were talking about love. And to short circuit this introduction, I'll allude to something else that's been in the news in order to set this up recently, in the last few months. There's I think he's a neuroscientist from South Carolina. I don't need to mention his name, but he wrote a book. I read it. It's very beautiful. And this scientist had a near-death experience and wrote very, very beautifully about it from his perspective as a scientist. And in this experience that he wrote about as being his highest experience of truth, he met saints and Jesus Christ, and it's a very, very gorgeously written book. So I said to our dinner companions last night that had this gentleman, instead of living in the Carolinas, had he been a scientist, a medical doctor in Bangalore, what would be the likelihood that his pantheon of deities would have included Jesus Christ?
No, it wouldn't.
Who might he have encountered on that road? And so it invites us to explore, well, what is behind these calibrations of pure energy that we experience, that we put into form, into forms that are consistent with the way we're socialized, our own experience. But there is some mysterious thing that is below these surfaces that can show up in this individual's experience as Jesus, and somebody else's experience as Vishnu, and somebody else's experience as and on and on and on. Right. So that being said, how might the same operation apply to our experience of love, of all that is, of being constantly in the presence of this grace that comes as naturally to us as flight to an eagle, that is a gift that is always there, and to which we bring ourselves limited only by our past, only by our memory, only by about whatever the filters are that reduce love to something that we can chew and swallow.
Right. No, it's a great inquiry. In fact, the inquiry itself, I had mentioned to you that I've become aware that my answers tend to precede my questions, just in my experience, right? I recognize that I usually only ask questions that I already have an answer to. So I won't go far into that, but that's just the way my filters works, is that I generally, every once in a while, I come upon a question where I really sincerely don't have an answer, and that's exciting to me. And so I'm wondering, And it's a love question. And I don't know what the question is precisely, but what is the question that invites us to keep discovering and keep deepening? Because this whole notion of a truth, right? It's my truth. It's my frame of reference. But I recognize my own limitations.
Well, the truth is an evolving
that's what I'm saying.
With mystery.
And today's truth may not be tomorrow's truth, just in the way that I hold it. But the idea there's deeper truths that are emerging that aren't framed so tightly in my personal context or in the deities that I'm familiar with. So it's the expanding question is that I want to pose. And I don't know what the question is, but it's something about, it's a love question, and it's a deepening and a deeper and a deeper and a deeper that offers.
If only we knew what the question was.
Well, that's what we're going to work on today. So you have a guest for us.
I do. I have the most wonderful guest who I know has plenty
of questions.
Good. She does have plenty of questions, and that is the sign of somebody that is a true friend, somebody that has many more questions than answers. And what is also wonderful is she has plenty of juicy answers too.
Yeah.
So
we're not against answers here. We're okay with that.
Sadhvi Saraswati is with us today. She is American-born, a PhD, who moved to India a gazillion years ago when she was a gazillion years younger.
I'll have to take off my shoes to count that high.
She went on a trip to India while she was working on her PhD at Stanford, and she thought she was just going to go and grab a meal and eat some vegetarian and come home and finish the program. But life had other plans.
Yeah.
And she was officially ordained by Puja Swamiji into a tradition of sannyas, and lives on an ashram. I think it's called Parmath, and you can correct me on that, in Rishikesh, where she serves Swamiji's humanitarian projects and teaches meditation and gives discourses, and is all around generally indispensable.
Beautiful.
So I am so glad to have the indispensable Sadhvi with us, parked as she is by the side of the road, somewhere between Studio City and Glendale, in what Swamiji refers to as the Holy Woods.
Sadhvi, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a wonderful honor and joy to be here.
Yeah, it's our joy and honor to have you. So we're splashing around in
the
love question, the sort of mysterious, glorious, expansive, I don't know, of what love has to offer us as a kind of never-ending pursuit. And to that, I would love to have your perspective, love to have your perspective on love.
Of course. Well, first of all, for someone who's a gazillion years old, I probably should have quite a bit more wisdom in this than I do. But
Wing it.
Nonetheless, what my instinct and experience and understanding of love is that basically, according to the Indian tradition, the Indian spiritual tradition, the soul, the self, is boundless. It's expansive. It cannot be contained. It's in everything. There is nothing in the universe that is not pervaded by that soul. And then we stick that soul for the purpose of fulfilling its particular duties in this life into a body. Of course, the body has got lots of bounds, and we've got skin, and we've got bones, and we've got a sense of I end here, and then you begin over there. It's this very, very limited container for something that is infinite and limitless. And I think what happens in love, regardless of what your background is, regardless of where you are, because soul is all one. So even though we may have taken birth in different countries, different hemispheres, different cultures, we may give it different names, nonetheless, the experience of love, whether it's love for a human partner, whether it's love for God, whether it's love for the self, whether it's love for the grass growing in your backyard or love for the sunset is an expansiveness. The soul, the self, has this experience of, and it's sort of this melting and merging back into a boundaryless existence. You know, when you think about the words that people typically use to describe being in love, it's always things like melting and merging and swimming and bathing and volcanoes and fireworks and oceans and waves. And it's all of these words that convey a sense of union, merging, boundarylessness, infinite nature.
It's also, Sadhvi, sometimes when I hear those words, I'm thinking of classic country and western song titles that come to mind. Sometimes when I hear those words, I hear through the ears of my heart, I am able to discern that these songs are about a desire to lose responsibility by going back to an easier time when we are children, and where we feel dependent on extrinsic things, and I don't have to be concerned with who I am. I don't have to be concerned with understanding how my mind works, how my patternings have worked, and that I look as that classic line from the movie Jerry Maguire, "You complete me." When we look for completion outside of ourselves, it's a sad recipe for long go-rounds of karma.
Absolutely. It's not so much a sense of I'm a half and I'm finding another half, or I'm a third and I'm finding another two-thirds. No. It's much more, if you had to use an analogy, like the drop returning to the ocean. The drop in and of itself is whole and complete. There's nothing that the drop is lacking. You couldn't look at that and say, oh, that's only half a drop, or it's a quarter of a drop. It needs something else. And yet, inherent in the drop, inherent in the consciousness and the awareness of the drop, is the knowledge that before the heat of the sun evaporated it, before the clouds then carried it someplace else and dropped it down as rain, it actually was part of the ocean. And so there's that consciousness that pulls the drop then. We may use words like gravity, but however we describe it, it's all simply describing the nature of the drop to return back to its source. And I think that's what it is. You know, fire always goes up. Why? The source of fire is the sun. It's returning to its source. Water comes down. It's the source of the earth, the ocean. And for us, our source is this infinite, boundless existence. And so we're through love, through prayer, through spirituality, returning to that. But it's not a relinquishing of responsibility. It's not a relinquishing of the drop that I am. But much more, it's an awareness of how much more I am, and the fact that this drop doesn't have to carry the world on its shoulders, but actually the drop is only one of billions of other drops, all of which are connected to each other because they're all part of the ocean.
I love it. It's an expanded context wherein there's a kind of spiritual maturity, an understanding of our nature that still, with all of its wisdom and understanding, includes an element of mystery.
Absolutely.
because that's the offer, right? That's the offer that doesn't crunch it down, that allows us to keep having.
We don't get to say offer on this program.
And
unfold.
That's another word.
We have a little jargon alert here.
I got busted on one of the. We realized we're going to take a break.
That's $5 in the coffee can.
Take a break here in a minute, but we have to kind of fill you in on one of the rules. We realized, and it only really applies to Barnett and I. So if you say the word, it's okay. But we realized that we get caught in jargon, which becomes brittle, and then we lose the mystery. We lose.
We're going to start putting $5 in a coffee can for everyone, and we should be able to have a fairly good party every week.
I'm going to be broke. All right, listen, we're going to come back.
We're going to sell some stuff, and we're going to be right back.
We have some
with
offers.
Sadhvi Saraswati, right after we sell these very generous offers.
Stay with us.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
We're back with Sadhvi and Freeman, and this is Barnett, and our incredibly cool hipster middle-of-the-night FM kind of music thing. I'm just...
You're so proud of that.
Yeah, I just feel like we're in the middle of the night.
If you repeat that you really like that again, I'm going to charge you $5.
That's true. That's finished. So, yes.
All right, explain this.
Sadhvi, you should know. And anybody driving around in a car thinking, if we don't explain this, I'm changing stations. What that is we have a tendency here on the program to track back to well-worn ideas and languaging that we become habituated in. And it gets boring, and one of the net effects of it is it wrings out the juiciness of whatever we're talking about, because it starts to become rote. And if we put the clutch in on that, and if we're mindful about that, it requires us to revisit what comes up from a more, from a fresh place and from a place of innocence.
How wonderful!
And it's a practice that enables us to receive what is to receive. It's a love.
It isn't always that wonderful.
It's a love practice.
Yeah, but let me say this: it isn't always that wonderful. I'll be honest; it gets uncomfortable. I understand that I have. That I go back to my comfort zone, right? But then we're into some kind of spiritual jargon, and it becomes brittle, and it loses the organic sort of wonderful discovery kind of aliveness, and becomes, as Barnett was saying, kind of rote. So thank you, Sadhvi, for saying it's wonderful, but it doesn't always feel that wonderful.
I want to throw something in here, and then I know that Sadhvi, you'll have much to say about it. I had the exquisite pleasure of Sandy and I having dinner with you and Swamiji on, was it Saturday night or Sunday night? Some nights ago.
Recently.
A couple of nights ago. And one of the beautiful takeaways for me is the very palpable experience of Swamiji's love, his attention. So there is not this sense of tracking back to what was in the way that we are creating disciplines to wean ourselves from. He simply brings himself there, and you have a sense of being seen, of being heard in a virgin way. It's not like it's not like being seen with a whole bunch of assumptions. Not that I have a history with Swamiji, but there's a very clear sense of there aren't any assumptions that are operating. There are less filters. There are less screens there, in the same way where if he walked by a tree, he would have intimacy with that tree, not with a label of treeness.
I love that.
So that comes through very, very palpably for me. And there is an experience of very deep relationship, whether or not words are exchanged. In fact, the words tend to iris down the juiciness of the relationship. Now, I know, Sadhvi, that you have not moved your entire life to India because this is a strange concept to you. So I want to invite you to share what you can of that experience.
Sure. Well, let me begin general and then come specific.
Mm-hmm.
I think on a general level, what you experienced is absolutely true. And it's actually very interestingly connected to what you were talking about with the words or the concept of going back and how it becomes stale. We are all changing minute to minute and moment to moment. Even people who are not on a spiritual path, even people who aren't trying to change or looking at themselves or working on themselves in any sort of way, nonetheless, the sheer nature of the body is changed. The cells themselves are regenerating minute to minute, moment to moment. So you're not the same person you were an hour ago. And if you're actually on a path that is a path of inquiry, a path of contemplation, a path of asking yourself over and over again, why did I do that? What did this mean to me? What's my motive here? Why did I have that particular inner response or inner reaction? You're changing even quicker, perhaps. And what being with Swamiji is, and what's so phenomenal about it, is that you're right. He's absolutely responding to who you are and where you are right here, right now, not where you were an hour ago or earlier today. And his relationship with you is only in this moment. I can't tell you the number of times something will have happened where I'll do something or I'll say something or I won't do something that won't be right. I'll have worked on something and it wasn't exactly what he wanted, or the situation doesn't matter, but whatever it is. And he will say, oh, it should have been like this, or it should have been like that, or you shouldn't have done this. And I'll, of course, feel miserable, and, my day will be ruined. And later on in the day, when I see him again, I'll say to him, I'm really sorry about that thing. And he looks at me back, what? What thing? And he'll say, oh, well, you remember a few hours ago or this morning or last night? This? And he absolutely has no recollection of it. It's like the ocean. Mm-hmm. It was there in the moment. He said what he needed to say. He gave whatever instruction he needed to give, and it's over.
Wow.
And my river...
Because he has no agenda around holding it. He doesn't need to bank it for the future.
Exactly.
What he does want to bank, there are things that he does want to bank. His relationship with you, what is beautiful and good and true for him, his compassion and his service in the world. He's intentional about how he organizes his own field for his own purposes. That comes through so articulately, even in the silence.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's right there with you in that moment, not who you were last year or who you think you are. The number of concepts of sense of self that I had when I walked into India and that he just basically kicked out the door, it's pretty much all of them. I mean, there's no concept that I had of myself, either positive or negative, that I had 17 years ago when I walked in that I still have today.
Wow.
Because every one of them, he's just shown me that that's not true. Neither the good part nor the bad part.
Mm-hmm.
So the radio professional in me feels compelled to track back to the initial inquiry, the love inquiry, the sort of rigor in the teasing out the love, the moment-to-moment love, recognizing that there's this element of change, that things are constantly changing, the relationship with change, not resisting that sort of, and again, tracking back again and again and again to what's lovable in this, what can I be with in this kind of, again, compassionate, loving, open, expansive way.
Well, I think it's an essence,
It's a what? Say that word again.
It's the essence essence rather than the form.
The essence, the function, not the form.
Yeah.
So the love is a love for the essence of who you are.
Yeah.
Not for the form that is taking in this moment. So, it's like if I'm meditating on Ganga and I've got my eyes open and I'm staring at a spot on the river, and in my mind, I believe that spot is not changing. My eyes are absolutely fixed on one spot of the river, perhaps how the water is washing over a rock. Well, that image actually is changing millisecond by millisecond because the water is rushing. And yet, what I'm meditating upon is the essence of Ganga in that spot. It's not the molecule of H2O, or my attention would have just gone downriver with the water. And I think what most of us tend to do in our relationships to each other is to lock into the form. What you said, what you're doing, what you look like now, all of these things on the surface. Whereas what Swamiji is doing and what real love, that real essence of love is about, is love for who you are on the core, despite the fact that the surface is changing. And that comes, going back to what we were talking about earlier, of the drop in the ocean, with a very, very deep experiential awareness of being connected. And that sense that you're not separate from me. Not that I am this locked being and you are that locked being, but that actually that same breath flows through all of us. That same spirit flows through all of us. We're actually one. And so that is where the love becomes really expansive. It's not me as this finite being loves you as that finite being, but really this merging of infinity into infinity.
And it shows up in myriad ways, but one of the hallmarks that I am discovering for function, essence, and function itself to show up in form that is always aligned has to do with expressing compassion. And by that I mean this active caring that I feel that is born out of my own experience of suffering and of struggle, so that I can relate to the parts of myself that continue to do that and in others. And the love can be expressed in a desire, in a willingness to see that in others, in myself and in others, and to recognize those who are deep in it and those who are less caught in it, and also to see them and to hear them and not to judge in any way, not to make them less or hierarchicalize them, but to create an environment of safety and diminution of their exposure to risk or to humiliation, to make those environments safe and to contribute. And I know that you and your work in the ashram, and that Swamiji, his life is about service, that is born out of this place of compassion.
Absolutely. It's a very beautiful concept, actually, because typically when we think of compassion, it's, again, me for you, me as this individual, and I have compassion for you, and therefore that means I'm a good person because, look, I've got this wonderful...
It's a better than. It becomes a better than, an ego trip.
Exactly. Whereas the compassion that Swamiji teaches and that he really tries to infuse within all of us in the service is we're not serving others, we're serving the self. They are permitting us to serve them, but to serve them as self. So, for example, if I trip and fall and I hurt my right leg, and so I start to limp, and my left leg takes extra weight, it's not that it's going to expect a gold star or a prize or you to praise it for taking this extra weight. It understands inherently that the right leg is self, and that therefore it's taking up the extra weight is just part of the package deal of being part of a body, part of one
we
body.
We see that in nature. We see this holistic interplay of nature where everything is interrelated and everything works.
And it's self-organizing.
In this gorgeous, yes, self-organizing, evolving complexity, without any, always giving, but not so much, it's not about what can I get, simply how can I participate and elevate the whole.
And it really tracks back to the drop in the ocean, that, part of the challenge is to know that the drop is part of the ocean.
Well, you have to know yourself as the drop.
That's it, because we keep struggling with, because it's self-organizing. One of the themes is the spiritual awakening is in large part an undoing. It's a peeling away of so many things that we've bought into that aren't our essence, that aren't our true nature. So it really is a returning home, if you will.
And it's a returning back to, in that same analogy, the molecule of H2O from the ocean. What we tend to identify with is that drop evaporated. It went into the clouds. The cloud carried one drop to the top of the Himalayas and let it go. So that drop now identifies as pristine and pure and beautiful and Himalayan glacial water, whereas another drop got in the sewage, and so now that drop identifies as sewage. And neither of them realizes, no, wait, this is just the clothes that I've got on for this particular journey.
I love it.
Back to the ocean.
I love it.
I love having Sadhvi Saraswati on KVTA AM talking about sewage and the Himalayas.
And saying that they're all just H2O, finding form in different ways, and that we don't need the hierarchy.
It's all water coming home.
As water flows, so does time and radio time. We are at a point where we need to say goodbye to our guest and take a commercial break. We'll be back on the other side of it to wrap up. But we want to be with you more often. We'd love to have you back with us, maybe in studio next time. When you're in town, I realize you're often in India, though you happen to be.
But our studio, the air conditioning is not working.
Yes,
and it's so humid not here, so you'll feel right at home.
That's right.
We'll heat it up for you.
Yeah, that's right. We'll turn off the air conditioning next time.
Sadhvi, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Love to you and to Swamiji.
Love to you both.
All right.
Bye now.
And for those of you listening, stay tuned. We'll be right back after these messages.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome back to the Edge of Possibility here on Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with Barnet Bain. Hey, a water drop that falls in the Himalayas is no better or worse than a drop of sewer water in the gutter somewhere. There's no hierarchy.
And your point?
No, that was her point.
And her point?
Yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was cool.
Yes, that's true.
I have a point. You want to make a point about that? I can make a point about it.
It has no... one does not have more value than the other, but one has a different impact on itself and on the environment. One is a different frequency, is expressing as a different frequency than the other, just as somebody who is a person who acts in the most unconscious and violent and reprehensible, with most reprehensible behaviors, does not have any more or less value, personal worth than anybody else, or than I do, or than anybody else on the planet. But they have very, very different orders of impact and ability to create harmony, safety, presence, consciousness, empowerment, self-awareness. So they're very, very different experiences. One is a very much more constricted experience than the other. There is a reason that Sadhvi it has been studying and working with Swamiji for, I think it's 17 years, and that is because he knows himself to be more of the Himalayan drop of water than she does at this point. And in relationship, she is becoming more of who she can be as he is.
Right. I was bringing, and I agree with all that. That's beautifully said.
There's always a tendency, and certainly in our community, there is a tendency for folks to say it's all perfect, and it is. But so we're not on an evolutionary path, and we should just leave everything as it is. But it is the
I wasn't suggesting that.
You weren't. But I know that we will receive. We constantly receive this sort of mail that it's all fine.
Right.
And
well, the response we get to
it's all fine, and yes, it's all fine, and we are made in the image of our Creator. We are literally co-creators, and that means that we have, since we are constantly recreating ourselves and everything else, instant by instant, to do it in conformity with our desire, our will and intention, known and unknown, and in co-creation with more and more empowered parts of ourselves and beyond ourselves. That is a recipe for what has been called heaven on earth in some traditions, the shift in more Passaic traditions. So we embrace and accept what is and love it, and at the same time recalibrate a frequency so that it can, so that we can elevate beyond it. We are what we think. We are what we put our attention to.
And what Swamiji and others who have come to recognize the more of themselves, who can act as, let's say, purifiers in this sort of sewer water, pure water way, because
guides.
Well, because they can see the essence, they can see H2O below whatever else has glommed on to that water drop. They see through that. I think, again, some of the ways that we track back are the best we have. I have a mentor in Father Greg Boyle, Father G, another G, Father G, who sees the essence in the tattooed gang member versus the behaviors and the history and the hurts. He sees through all of that. And in that exchange, they are lifted to see a glimpse of themselves beyond what they've identified with. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is what we're talking about with people who have committed their lives to being of service. They've done some amount of inner work to be able to see through the illusion, the veil, whatever you want to call it, to recognize the essence in the rainwater and in the sewer water.
It's so ratios of experience that are like prorated. They're so individual. Ratios of experience and understanding. In the moments when I have glimpses that are not just in my head of the oneness, but experiential insight into that this is a dream and I'm lucid in it and I am all the players. In those moments, my behaviors shift because it's me. I wouldn't be chewing off my own leg.
Yeah.
And so the compassion is a compassion for myself. When I lose those peak moments of awareness, what is retained is the pattern, the trail. And the trail says, well, even though I can perform compassion and I can lens my world through frames of compassion, and it is not with the same understanding that I am self-caring and self-loving, but I know that the pattern, even if I think it's other, it's still a more integrated pattern than not doing that at all. So it's like watching a graph spike up and down, a jagged graph moving towards ever more awareness and empowerment. I think Adyashanti, I don't think I know, he refers to this as an enlightenment, that experience that he calls abiding, when you have these moments and they are sustained, and unabiding. But from the unabiding... You could
say conscious and unconscious, frankly.
You can, but it's not quite the same, because we are all conscious. And even when you get knocked in the head and you fall down under a truck, you are still consciousness.
Right.
So the ability to sustain heightened levels of self-awareness,
right,
and identifying yourself as a heart field inside of which lives a mind field, inside of which lives physicality, inside of which lives emotionality, inside of which lives a whole bunch of expressions of ourselves as players, shadow players on a screen, and they're all us.
Yep.
To know that in the way that when I wake up from a dream and I realize, oh, I was every single character in that dream. I just dreamed that I was this little skin-encapsulated avatar moving through it and people were chasing me and stuff. But I actually was the person who was chasing the little me. So to know that in life, to be a lucid liver and have it be an abiding experience, how might my life be different if I understood that moment to moment? How might that, where would the blame go? Where would the struggle go? How might my expressions of love for myself and for others who I really understood literally as myself? So, hanging with Swamiji, I have a reference for, well, that is certainly more in that sort of experience. I could recognize more of that sort of experience. Everything is, the paradox is everything is personal. First, nothing is personal until you flips and you realize everything is personal. And then I suppose I know there are mysteries beyond that.
Hanging with Swamiji, I would say the same about hanging with Father G. It's a similar quality of experience where in that presence, that ability to stay in that sort of higher frequency or a relationship with the illusion where even if we get hooked into it, we're not that, he's not that bought into it. In other words, there's a level of conscious separation between what one might call physical world reality and a deeper, more profound, higher, I don't know if that's the language, sense of what really is going on, the essence, right? So that the rainwater and the sewer water can be what form they're in and still at their essence be H2O. That's a beautiful thing. I mean, and it's interesting is as you were talking, the work of constantly modulating from that larger perspective, that the glimpses begin to be more and more consistent. The attunement or what was the word you used again?
I don't know.
Yeah, I
see, I'm in the moment, finally.
Yeah, that's so...
for the moment, anyway, I'm in the moment.
Oh, that's great. I use the word conscious or conscious versus going into a kind of unconscious, a kind of patterning where I'm just playing out a familiar script. So that sort of edge of awareness, the presence, the conscious now, the
aliveness,
arising moments. Yeah, we're just I'm flailing for words, but that quality of being in a level of awareness where I have a bigger context to hold it, which is the compassion and is the love and is that deeper relationship with the all that is.
A lot of times when people talk about compassion, the more that I become attuned to it as an energy, a frequency, a force, like electricity, you put your finger in the socket and it'll crank you around a little bit.
Right.
But in the world, we talk about compassion, and everybody's voice gets soft and velvety and mushy, and so it is getting put through those kind of lenses and calibrators in the same way that when we talked about the beginning of the show, the scientist who had an experience, and he said, well, no, now I know, I experienced the afterlife, and I saw the saints, and I saw Jesus, so I've been there, I know. The function below it, the essence below even the function, the pre-essence even below the essence, the possibility even before it is possible. Now you're not even in the subconscious anymore. Now we're talking about energies that are in the unconscious, in the unknown. So they're just conceptual. Those things, they all kind of stack up. They all kinds of stack up. But to be able to know that, yeah, I am operating with all of those things, and so I'm going to set them aside. And now when I consider anything, compassion, it doesn't have to be tempered by, I don't have to get all soft and hallmarky.
Yeah.
I can just go, yeah, compassion. And sometimes compassion looks rough.
Compassionate anger.
Compassionate.
Why not?
Compassionate, however it comes up. You know, there's 33 archetypes in the major arcana. They're not all sweetness.
Yeah, so maybe we want to have, and we're at the end of this show, but an anger conversation, because anger as an expression of resolve and as an expression of boundaries, an expression of having a sense of what works and doesn't work for me, personally, personal authority, and that can be understanding of other people's positions and their experience and whatever without having to make them wrong or right. It's a powerful way of holding what does healthy anger look like. And I wonder if, language-wise, it isn't compassionate anger. Like, I'm not making other people wrong. I'm just standing in my personal knowing.
And creating your own boundary.
Yeah.
Inside of this boundary, I define myself, and I don't have to manipulate or dominate or change something on the outside. But so much of how we are conditioned and how we function as a society is you have to change, the system has to change, this politics has to change, or something out there has to change, and I'm outraged.
That's the disempowered anger. That's the rage place where it's not empowered. There's not enough of a sense of self that my yeses and my nos are my yeses and my nos. They don't have to be everybody's, but I stand by them. And there's a level of resolve in that, and compassion for people who don't have the same yeses and nos without having to kill them and make them wrong.
Well, grist for the cutting edge consciousness mill. I think that we've pretty much come to the end of our very, very tight fit in time and space here. On
I like, though, before we end, I like when we, I love the arc and the craziness of this show. I don't know if I told you this. We have about a minute left, I think. Yeah. So we had a guest who came into our studio because they loved our show, and they said, I want to see what you guys do. Can I be a guest? It's someone I know. And I said, sure. They came in. Did I ever send this to you? They showed how our show works from almost an analytical sense of how we set it up with a personal story, how we go into da-da-da-da-da, and how we wrap it up then. It was really kind of brilliant because we've done what we do mainly organically. There hasn't been a tremendous amount of analysis as to what it is we do. It's very fascinating. I'll have to send that to you. It's really brilliant.
Please do.
How they looked at what we do.
Put it up on our website. Maybe it'll be of interest to...
that's actually a good point.
A giggle for...
Yeah, or we put it up on our Facebook page. People can read it as a note, perhaps, of how the show was analyzed and what it is we do, because we don't know what we do. But what I love, just intuitively, is I love when we end a show on a question, which is what we try to start with, that then spills over into future shows and lines us up for a whole possible
big
dialogue.
Question. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. We hope you'll join us again here next week or wherever and whenever you find us in all your various media. I hope I haven't asked you for a while to visit our Facebook page, and ending on a question. What are you having for lunch?
And with that, we hope that you keep tuning in to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Thanks for listening.